In the last lecture, we started with the session hijacking. We have seen the introduction of the session hijacking. Basically, the session hijacking is nothing but the capturing of the active session that is established between the user and the server. And this connection is established by via legitimately, that is via proper username and password that is entered by the user. And whenever this session is established, in general, the session ID will be generated, which is the key for launching this particular session hijacking attacks at the application level. We have seen this particular introduction and motivation behind the session hijacking, in how many ways the session hijacking can be performed, and other details we have seen in the last lecture. Basically, the session hijacking can be done at two levels. One is at the application level, another is at the network level. In the application level, usually the attacker will exploit the vulnerabilities that are identified in the web application, especially like improper validation mechanism, or no validation mechanism, or poor generation of the session IDs, maybe any other vulnerability that we'll discuss in this particular lecture is used for launching the session hijacking attacks. That is at the application level. Basically, at the application level, the protocols such as HTTP, FTP will be used, and the attacker will try to identify the versions of the HTTP or FTP, and based on that vulnerability is identified, the attacker will try to inject some malicious code at the application level. This is what the application level attack, where in case of network level attack, it is mainly focused on the TCP or UDP or IP level traffic for performing the attacks. Next is we have seen that the session hijacking can be done actively or passively. Actively means the attacker will try to interact with the ongoing communication and may inject some fabricated packets and get his work done. This is what we call active way of injection or active way of session hijacking, where in case of passive way of session hijacking means he will not interact with the communication that is happening between the user and server, provided he will mainly focus on the sniffing of the packet traffic, and via sniffing whatever the traffic he captured, he will try to analyze the patterns and will extract the useful information by the attacker, which is required for the attacker. Brute forcing, see, there are three main techniques, especially like brute forcing a session ID, stealing an ID, and calculating an ID. These are the three ways with which the attacker will launch the session hijacking attacks. The root causes of the session hijacking attacks were discussed in the last lecture. Then followed by, we have seen the difference between the spoofing and hijacking. Spoofing is a passive one, whereas hijacking is an active activity. And also, finally, we concluded the last lecture with the session hijacking and web applications. What are the possible entry points for launching the session hijacking was discussed in the last lecture. This session hijacking can be done in the web applications via capturing the session IDs that are embedded in a URL or which are embedded in the hidden fields of the application, or via cookies that are used by the browser. These are the three entry points for especially to launch the session hijacking at the web application level. In this lecture, we will see the two categories of session hijacking. One is the session hijacking at the application level, another is session hijacking at the network level. First, we'll see the application level session hijacking. So here, types of application level session hijacking. The first one is session sniffing. The first category of the application level session hijacking is session sniffing. It is a special case of sniffing in which sniffing is performed by aiming a specific target. That means the attacker will choose a target and will perform the footprinting and enumeration process. That means footprinting process means in which he will come to know the overall idea of the target. Then he may perform the scanning and will get to know what is the IP address, what are the open ports, what are the closed ports, and at the same time he may also perform vulnerability scanning and will come to know any vulnerabilities present with the applications that are running on several ports. And finally, he will choose one target and will use some sniffing tools such as Wireshark or TCP dump, and will always aim to get the traffic which is passing on to that particular IP address or coming from the IP address. So this is what we call session sniffing. By making the traffic collection, and the attacker will try to analyze this particular traffic so as to get the session information, whether he is using the regular patterns or an encrypted pattern or any kind of security that is used by the traffic, and all these aspects are going to be analyzed by the attacker. So this is called session sniffing. Next one is, in the collected traffic itself, he may find various numericals such as session tokens, sequence numbers, some acknowledgement numbers, and many other numbering things will be maybe find in the traffic that he collected. So basically, this predicting session tokens is dealing with the identification of the pattern among the session tokens that they identified in the network traffic. For example, these predicting session tokens require a lot of experience for the attacker, as he has to make an educated guess by looking at the session tokens. Consider the following example. Here, there is an example given here. This is the session tokens that are generated via the example.com website, www.example.com/apps/ex. This is an example application that is logged in by the users, and whenever it is logged in, a session ID was generated like this: ex 20202210 and 131001. Here 2020 is there. This 20202210, this is indicated in red. 1310 is indicated in blue, and 01 is indicated in green. Actually, these three are three different components. These three are three different components that can be identified via pattern. The reason is 20202210 is found common in all the tokens, all the session ID tokens. Whereas 1310, 1410, 1510, 1610, this pattern is changing or incrementing by 1000. This pattern is incrementing by 100 every time. So here previously it is 1310, and here 1410, and here 1510. So this pattern, that is blue pattern, is incrementing by 1. Where in case of the last green pattern, that is 01, 02, 03, 05, 08. So I can, if you are an attacker, or if an attacker is somewhat well experienced, he has to make a guess what could be the next session ID that will be generated by the server. The next session ID that may be generated by the server is ex 20202210 1810, because this particular pattern is incrementing by 100. So it may be 1810. Now this pattern need to be analyzed. It is like a Fibonacci series, whereas 01 plus 1, 01 plus 2 is 03, 02 plus 3 is 05, 03 plus 05 is 08. So next could be 05 plus 08 is 30. So the next session token may be like this: EX 20202210 1810 and 13. So this could be the session ID for the next session. He may make an educated guess, but here uh, that this particular session IDs may be generated on the particular day of browsing this. The reason is the session ID may be generated like this: 2020 is the year number, and 22 is the date, and 10 is the month. So year, day, and month. If the attacker tries to get the information on the next day, say for example today, it may be 2020 2310, and it may start with maybe 1010 and it may go. The tokens may increment in the above mentioned manner. This is the way the session IDs may be generated, but actually this way of session ID generation may be easily predictable because the patterns are fixed. So that reason it is always recommended to use a random sequence number generation. So understand the pattern in the above URL and make an educated guess. Already we have made an educated guess what could be the next session ID. So this is the way how the attacker will predict what could be the next session ID, and he may use the next session ID and get the session hijacking attacks. Another type of application level session hijacking attack is man in the middle attack. So here attacker directly intercepts the ongoing session by maybe by launching the ARP poisoning on the target computer, or maybe DNS spoofing on the target computer. He may use any one of the technique and may launch the MITM, man in the middle attack. Usually this man in middle attack will be performed at the network level, or we can say it will fall under the network level session hijacking, because he will use either ARP cache poisoning or DNS spoofing, which are basically will be done at the network level. That will be done by the man in middle attacker. The similar kind of attack which will be happened at the application level is called man in the browser attack. In the man in the browser, it is most common form of cross-site scripting, Trojans, and JavaScript issues. So whenever these issues are there in the web browser, then this man in the browser attack is possible. Possible methods of performing this attack are, for example, browser helper objects. Many of the browsers will load dynamic link libraries when they are started. The attacker may inject Trojans in the form of DLLs. These DLLs may be required by the browser, and these DLLs may be consisting of the malicious code. Whenever it is loaded into the memory, as long as the browser is on or running, these DLLs will be loaded into the memory, and that particular malicious code will be executed, and that malicious code may reveal the information of the cookies and the browsing history and many other details that are attached to the browser. So corrupting the DLLs loaded by the browser during the startup. This is one technique will be followed in the man in the browser attack. Another attack is extensions, add-ons and extensions attached to the browser. Many people usually send that I have developed an extension or add-on. Please try to include in your browser. You may use it like that. So in such a cases, what will happen? The add-on may consisting of some malicious code, and that malicious code may capture or extract the information that was available in the web browser, especially like searching history, cookies, and these cookies may consisting of the phone numbers, addresses, sometimes credit card information, maybe any other sensitive information that is available. So this, whenever you run the add-on, automatically whatever the content is there in your browser, that will be automatically sent to the attacker, and he may get the information that from so and so IP addresses and from so and so duration, these are the data that was received, and entire data will be sent back to the attacker. The attacker will be having the chance of analyzing that data, and he may plan the attack firing of the exploits on the target machine. Next one is API hooking, linking between the executables and libraries. Here, executables and libraries in the sense, usually your the add-ons or whatever the scripts that will run under the web browser will make use of some dynamic link libraries. So here these executables and dynamic link libraries are attached together via the development platform that we are using with the browser. For example, if you use Chrome browser, there will be the API hooking will be there. APIs will be provided with the Chrome browser, and those APIs are used to hook or link between the script that you are writing, that is the executable script that you are writing, and the DLLs that you are going to inject. And these DLLs and the script that you are writing may be linked together with the help of the developer's API, and that will be loaded into the browser. And final one is JavaScript, especially by using the malicious AJAX worms. So here malicious AJAX forms means asynchronous JavaScript XML. These are the most commonly used form of the JavaScript nowadays. So this AJAX worms may also be used for running the code under the web browser. So these are the various ways in which the man in the browser attack may be performed. Next type of application level session hijacking techniques are cross-site scripting. This is the most commonly happening, or this is the most common attack by any of the attacker for launching the session hijacking attack. So it mainly enters the system via request, especially via request will come. That means if you request any file to download, or if you request any link, if the link is redirected. So these are the many things, request forms, or these are the many request forms. In this via this request forms, you will get this particular uh, uh, malicious code will be entered into your computer or into the browser. And mainly this will also happen because of the absence of the validation mechanism of the incoming data via dynamic content. You may use the JavaScript or Ajax for dynamic content generation and also dynamically generating the fields, and the dynamic generating fields may be saved dynamically. So for all the dynamic content, you may use some specialized scripts. But whenever you use those scripts, if the validation mechanism is not proper, then it may lead to the session hijacking attacks. How it will be happened? Because while entering the data by the user, he may enter malicious code in that. Usually malicious code, if the validation is not there, then automatically it will be saved in the databases. Whenever it is saved in the database, whenever the server or the administrator of the web server or the administrator of the database server performs any querying or maybe any fine tuning, this stored procedure or stored code may be executed and the content may be captured. Mostly it will enter the system via JavaScript, Flash, and other executables. The objective of this attack is boundless. As I told just now, there is no specific uh, way of performing the attack like this. The objective of this attack is boundless, such as it includes cookies reading, traffic redirection, stealing the user data and credentials, stealing the financial data, and many other things may be possible via this particular session hijacking attack, or especially like cross-site scripting attack. Basically, this cross-site scripting will be performed in two ways. One is via stored and reflected attacks, or we can say that stored cross-site scripting or reflected cross-site scripting. These are the two categories of cross-site scripting. Basically, the stored cross-site scripting can be done easily if you find vulnerability in the web application page. But reflected cross-site scripting is little bit complicated than the stored cross-site scripting that we'll discuss now. The stored cross-site scripting, it is a very dangerous attack appears when an web application allows the user to store data during the visit of the site. So whenever the user enters data and if the data is stored without proper validation or verification, then this type of attacks may be possible. If the user is an attacker and if he stores the malicious code in the application, then the execution of the code during the use by the server may lead to hacking. This is what the basic idea of the stored XSS attack. The XSS scenario is as follows. How this XSS attack will be, that is stored XSS attack will be performed. First of all, the attacker stores malicious code into the web page. How he will enter the malicious code? Just like how remaining other users will perform the browsing of the web page. In the same way, the attacker will also visit the web page, and if there exists form filling or some other thing, he will try to fill the page with some wrong data. But wherever the vulnerability is available, that is the field of the page where this vulnerability is available, there he will enter a script consisting of the malicious code. The user authenticates in the application. Anyhow, a temporary username password he may create in that website, and he may enter via username and password. The user visits the vulnerable page. Malicious code is executed by the user's browser. So whenever the same page is again opened, like for example, there is a page called profile page. In that profile page, there are one or two fields are there which are vulnerable and capable of storing the code or data without validation. Then in such a cases, if the attacker injects the malicious code in that page and save it, then whenever for the next login, if the same user or maybe any other user runs the same profile page, then the previously stored content may be run again, and it may lead to the capturing of the browsing history and cookies that are available in the browser. This is called malicious code is executed by the user's browser. So this is the way how the XSS, that is cross-site scripting, stored cross-site scripting scenario will be performed. Depending upon the code injected, an attack can perform the following. So this particular stored XSS attack may lead to the following scenarios. One is hacking another user's browser, because the profile page may not be visited with the same browser. He may go to the other browsers or maybe any other browser with which the valid username and password can be entered and connected to the web server or maybe the database server. So the reason, wherever the browser whatever the browser with which the user logins, that browser content may be hacked. Capturing the sensitive information viewed by the application users, pseudo defacement of the application, port scanning of internal hosts, because the code may be executed at the server end. So the port scanning of the internal host may be done. That means whatever the hosts that are connected with the server and all the servers, all the connected systems, internal ports may be checked or scanned, so that it will reveal that whether the ports are open or closed or filtered or are ready for connectivity. Directed delivery of browser-based exploits. Usually, there are many browser-based exploits are available. So these exploits may be transported to the browser side, and these exploits may be fired on the browser, so that the browser may be crashed and its related information may be obtained by the attacker. This is what the stored XSS attack. Now we'll move on to the reflected XSS attack. It is more complicated, or we can say it is a little bit complicated attack than the stored XSS attack. Basically, this reflected XSS stored in the sense we have seen previously, some malicious code will be injected into the web application via web forms or something where the validation mechanism is not available. Where in case of reflection, this particular attack will reflect other things also. That is the reason it is called as reflected XSS attack. It is a complicated attack than the stored XSS attack. This attack will happen when an attacker injects browser executable code in a single HTTP response. Whatever the browser executable codes are there, if they have included in the HTTP response, then this particular attack will be performed. Usually, in our or will make use of the JavaScript, Visual Basic Script, and other scripting languages that will run under the web browser. So under the web browser, you will happily execute the JavaScript or VB script and other scripting languages, and that runs under the browser. Especially this VB script will be used by many of the web applications that will use .NET technology, whereas JavaScript will be used by many applications that will use PHP or JSP. VB script is popular in creating the macros of the MS Office or any Visual Basic script, Visual Basic application. So that is the reason if you look at if you try to download any VB script based macro and turn on your antivirus, mostly the antiviruses will detect that script as malicious. This is what the in general will happen. So that is the reason always try to check the validity of or the check the nature of the script that is going to be executed in the browser. So for that, a browser will be having the option of allowing the executables to run under the browser or not. So that you are supposed to choose the option to choose this option to especially for avoiding the reflected XSS attacks. The reflected XSS attack can install keyloggers. Keyloggers are one which will capture the keys that are generated in the application, steals the target browser cookies, perform clipboard theft. Clipboard theft means you may copy the content from the notepad or some other thing and may paste in the browser. So whenever you copy from the local system and to paste onto the browser, there will be an intermediary platform which is called clipboard, where this content, whatever the content you have copied via Control C or Control X, will be available at the clipboard level. So the clipboard is a small buffer. So the clipboard will be the target for the attacker. Whatever the content stored in the clipboard, especially if you are somewhat lazy to type the credit card information or credit card numbers, you may copy from the already type from the place where you have already typed it and may paste it in the browser. So but whether you have noticed or not, even though you copy and paste, that will be remained in the clipboard. So how many times you paste, the same number will be displayed. So that is the reason this will also be a key information for the attacker. Already he may be coming to know whenever the clipboard theft was performed. He will come to know the any copied content in the clipboard, and that if it is the credit card information or the card number, then it will be a easy task for him for performing the hacking activity. So disclosing users files and installing Trojan horse programs. Trojan horses are the backdoor entries that are entering into the computer. Okay, redirecting the user to another page or site. The site redirection may be done. The site redirection, that means in that particular site redirection, the redirection that is targeted site to be redirected may be managed by the attacker. Modifying presentation of the content or change the content of the page. So these are the possible possible attacks or possible consequences out of this reflected XSS attack. So XSS attack is a major attack in the web application level or application level attack. In the XSS attack, there are two categories: stored XSS attack. With this stored XSS attack will be performed based upon the lapses of the web application. That is, there is no improper checking or there is no proper validation. In such a cases, the stored XSS attack will be performed. Where in case of reflected XSS attack, here an executable is injected into the HTTP response, and that particular executable may be executed on the browser. That may lead to various consequences ranging from keyloggers to modifying the presentation of the content. And basically, this executable will be taking the advantage of the JavaScript, VB script, and other scripting languages that are running under the web browser. Next, we'll move on to the other attack that is possible on the session hijacking, which is called session fixation attack. This session fixation attack is possible when an application failed to generate new session IDs when a new user login into the system. Usually, there may be a problem at the algorithm of the session ID generation. In such a cases, this problem will occur. The following are few techniques to execute this attack. First thing is the session ID is sent to victim in a hyperlink, and the victim accesses the site through the malicious URL. It is just like you are making a registration in a website, and that registration, after registration, that website may send you an email. Okay, but that email will be sent by the attacker itself by saying something that this is the link you are supposed to click to accept or to enable your account. So whenever you click that, automatically the session ID that is generated by the attacker will be used by the web application. The reason is the web application is not that much capable of generating the session ID. So the reason, by taking this as advantage, attacker may inject his own session ID in that and make use of the URL whenever you click it from the, or whenever the target or victim clicks it from their mailbox. Attacker tricks the user. Second one is attacker tricks the user to log in the server via form created by them. That means attacker may develop his own form and will trick the victim to redirect to his page and log in to the page. Next one is a stored XSS. That is, stored cross-site scripting may be performed to store the session ID in cookies. So whenever you fill the form, whenever this particular malicious code is injected, and the web application is incapable of verifying or validating the code, in such cases, if that code is executed, the session ID may be captured and stored in the cookies. Whenever the cookies are accessed by the attacker, then automatically your session ID will be revealed. Using the parameter, there is a parameter called setCookie in HTTP response. The attacker is able to insert the value of session ID in the cookie and send it to the victim's browser. These are the 4 different ways in which this session fixation attack will be happening. The name itself telling you that session fixation means attacker is fixing your session with his own session ID. Either may be generated or predicted or guessed or maybe any other thing. But he is fixing your session and taking the control of your session by fixing it. Key concepts in session hijacking. Basically, these concepts will be as part of the network level session hijacking. Basically, these are the concepts that need to be understand, especially that will be happened at the transport layer and the network layer. Blind hijacking. In this blind hijacking, attacker blindly injects the fabricated or malicious packets into the TCP traffic. Usually, whenever he insert this malicious packets into the TCP traffic, and he won't look for the reply. That means he simply will send the packets. At least one or two packets may be received by the targets. This is what the intention of the attacker. Next one is IP spoofing. The attacker attempts as masquerading as the legitimate user by spoofing the victim's IP address. The victim's IP address may be used for fabricating the packet, and in the fabricated packet, the attacker may use the spoofed IP address and may send to the server. Next one is source routing. Basically, routing is discovering the path between the source to destination. Usually, whenever the packet is transmitted, it may be using a network level protocol called maybe any other protocol like AODV or DSDV or maybe any other routing protocol may be used. And this routing protocol will be having a particular path. Actually, especially the shortest path will be selected between the source and destination to route the packets. But here in this attack, source routing attack, packets are diverted to path desired by the hacker instead of the intended path. Actually, what is the original path is there. The packets will not travel to the original path. However, the packets will be transmitted via the path that is intended or that is desired by the hacker. Next one is the DNS. DNS spoofing is the way of disturbing the IP mapping. Usually, DNS means domain name service. Here, the English names will be mapped to the IP address. Basically, the attacker targets the poisoning of the IP mapping so that victim is diverted to the IP specified by the attacker. Victim will type something, but it will be redirected to the IP specified by the attacker. You may type it as www.sbi.co.in, but it may redirect it to ssbi.co.in. It will look the page will look like same as sbi.com.in. It is just like that. So many attacks were happened on the sbi.co.in. So that reason, this is one best example of DNS spoofing attack that was performed on SBI recently. Next one is ARP cache poisoning attack. Here, basically, in order to get the IP address, MAC, that is at the data link level, to get the IP address, whenever you know the physical address, then this ARP will be used, which is called address resolution protocol. And whereas RARP, reverse address resolution protocol, will map the IP to the MAC. When this particular ARP is poisoned, then the victim machine cannot identify what is the actual IP to which the packets has to be sent. Thereby, attacker will take the advantage of this and will catch hold of the packets that are sent by the victim machine. Next one is desynchronizing the connection. This is the most commonly happening attack, will be happened at any time, and also somewhat a little bit easy attack also. This is here what will happen is attacker attempts to break the sequence number in the packet communicating between the target client and server. Basically, TCP communication will happen via some sequence numbers that are included in the packet. Based on the sequence number, the server will acknowledge to that sequence number by incrementing it. But here, attacker attempts to break the sequence number. So first he will try to guess the sequence number, and he will always continuously send a reset signal to the server with the next coming sequence numbers. Whenever the reset signal was sent to the server with the next sequence numbers, the server will think that the same number will be sent by that is the particular packets are originating from the victim itself, and the connection will be resetted. Whenever the connection is resetted, then the attacker will come into the picture and he will try to take the control of the connection. This is what we call desynchronizing the connection. And we'll see some more. These are the key concepts that what we have discussed so far, or will fall under the network level session hijacking only. We'll see some more other network level session hijacking techniques. Basically, this network layer session hijacking techniques is used to, or the aim of this is to disrupt the functionality at the transport and network layers. Various techniques that are used in this are like this: TCP/IP session hijacking. In this attack performed by predicting the packet sequence numbers. And RST hijacking, as just now I told you, this is a form of desynchronizing the connection. So continuously sending the reset signal with the predicted sequence numbers. So usually already available sequence numbers, already completed, acknowledgement completed sequence numbers will not be used. However, he will observe the sequence number incrementing pattern and will use the next coming sequence number and will send the reset signal. While coming to UDP hijacking, it's the most easiest hijacking technique whenever the UDP services are used. The reason is, it is a little easy work as compared to TCP as well as UDP communication, because the UDP communication does not use the sequence numbers. The objective of this attack is to fool the target that the attacker's mission as the server. Attacker will send faster response than the server to make the target to believe attacker as the server. Attacker will sit on the communication channel and he will spoof the packets, and if he observes an UDP packet, the attacker will fabricate an UDP packet very fastly and will send the response faster than the server. Then the receiver will feel that this particular response has come from the original server, and in that way, over a period of time, the victim mission will believe that the attacker is the main server who is responding to it instead of the actual server. So this is the way this session hijacking will be performed in the UDP. Now finally, we will conclude this via discussing the countermeasures. It is always recommended to use encrypted traffic. That is, encrypting the network traffic is the effective preventive mechanism or preventive technique hijacking attacks from both internal and external sources. That is, within the LAN and outside of the LAN. Use the network monitoring applications such as intrusion detection systems or intrusion prevention systems. Especially for what purpose you are supposed to use this. These systems to be used to check for ARP broadcast traffic anomalies. There are specific anomalies called ARP broadcast traffic anomalies. The reason is, if you identify these anomalies, then you can predict that session hijacking is in progress. So this is very important. Session hijacking, you will come to know that there is a session hijacking is in progress once you identify ARP broadcast traffic anomalies via the intrusion detection and prevention system. Beware of local browser vulnerabilities. If possible, upgrade them. Don't use the old browsers. Always try to upgrade the browsers. Whenever the browser asks for the upgrade, be patient and upgrade it. Next is disable automatic running of scripts in the browser. So automatic running of scripts means messages, etc. So this kind of automatic running of the scripts in the browser should be disabled. Next, check for permissions of the third-party cookies. Whatever the cookies that you're using are allowing, you are supposed to check the nature of those cookies, and you should be in a position to enable the checking of the permissions for the third-party cookies to be allowed in the browser. Next is use the technologies. This is very important. Use the technologies IPsec and SSL. IPsec means IP security, and SSL means secure socket layer in the applications. Use stronger authentication mechanisms such as Kerberos. Another thing is implement the defense in depth policy. Defense in depth means a layered defensive strategies. Multiple defensive technologies are used to protect the network resources. Keep test on the timeout and session, especially, that is session ID generation during the application development. These are the things you are supposed to take care of to avoid session hijacking. The reason is prevention is better than cure. Whenever you do all these things, almost all 90 to 95% of your the infrastructure is secured. These are what the session hijacking countermeasures. We'll see some more things related to the session hijacking in the next lecture.